We are starting Lesson 5, Origins of Judaism. To get started, please open your e-text from your Google Classroom. It's Lesson 5 e-text in Savas. This is what you will be looking at on the first page of the e-text. Once you have that open, please open your digital notebook, which you will find under Digital Notebook and Video. Let's look at this digital notebook. It has 10 pages. If we scroll through, we see there are 10 pages total. First and second page are your vocab words, and then we get into the actual lesson all the way to page 10. This digital notebook is worth 20 points. So let's go ahead and get started with our lesson.
Lesson 5. Origins of Judaism. Judaism first developed as a religion more than 3,000 years ago in the Fertile Crescent. It was the world's first religion based on one God who set down laws about right and wrong. Judaism has helped shape the religions of Christianity and Islam, as well as modern ideas about law and human rights.
Let's go ahead and watch the video, The Origins of Judaism.
Judaism, the religion of the Jewish people, is one of the world's oldest religions. Judaism first developed more than 3,000 years ago in the Fertile Crescent. Although their neighbors worshiped many gods, the Israelites practiced monotheism, or the belief that there is only one God. They also believed that God has called on them to act based on ethics, or ideas of right and wrong. Much of what Jews believe about the origins of Judaism comes from the Torah, the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible. The first book of the Torah, called Genesis, tells of a man named Abraham, who may have lived around 1700 BCE and was a herder near the ancient city of Ur. According to the Torah, God told Abraham to leave behind all his possessions and move to the land of Canaan, on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea. The Torah says that God made a covenant or binding agreement with Abraham that Canaan would belong to Abraham's descendants. Canaan became known as the Promised Land. According to the Torah, Abraham's grandson Jacob had 12 sons. Each of Jacob's sons became the ancestor of at least one large group of related families called a tribe. Jacob was later renamed Israel. The 12 tribes descended from Jacob became known as the Israelites. The second book of the Torah, the Exodus, tells that the Israelites were forced from the Promised Land by a famine, a lack of food that was most likely the result of a drought. They moved to Egypt where grain was plentiful. Once in Egypt, however, they were enslaved and forced to work by the Egyptians. Moses was an Israelite who had been adopted into the Egyptian royal family. He was told by God to rescue the Israelites, so Moses asked the Pharaoh, or king of Egypt, to set his people free. According to the Torah, when the Pharaoh refused, God set 7 plagues, or terrible hardships, upon Egypt. Finally, the Pharaoh allowed the Israelites to leave Egypt. The escape of the Israelites from slavery in Egypt is called the Exodus. Each year, Jews celebrate Passover to commemorate the Jews' escape from slavery to freedom. The book of Exodus goes on to say Moses and his people wandered in the desert of the Sinai Peninsula for 40 years. Exodus tells how during that time, Moses met with God, who gave Moses the Torah. The Torah contains what we call today the 10 Commandments. Why is Passover an important Jewish holiday?
All right, let's look at the rest of this page. So for the vocab, we have monotheism, which is belief in a single God. Ethics, beliefs about what is right and wrong. Torah, which is the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible. Covenant, which is a binding agreement. Exodus, escape of the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. And commandment, in order to do something. So in your digital notebook on page 1 and 2, you will find these 6 words. You have already defined them if you have finished your Frayer. So you should make sure to use this definition because this is the definition that will be on the quiz, and you can use your digital notebook on the quiz. So you can either use the definitions from your Frayer or that PowerPoint I have provided with the definitions on it, or you may use the Savas definitions. They're all the same. So pause my video, take 6 minutes, and get pages 1 and 2 filled out with the definitions. Ready to move on to the next page, so we will click Next one time. We are on page 3 of your digital notebook. Let's go ahead and listen to this lesson.
The early Israelites and the worship of one God. The Israelites were related to other peoples of the Fertile Crescent, but they developed a unique culture. Although their neighbors worshipped many gods, the Israelites practiced monotheism, or the belief that there is only one God. They believed that God created each person in God's image.
All right, so we see on page 3, number 1, it is highlighted in yellow and it is a red number. Monotheism is the belief that, over here in the text, I have it circled. Pause my video and get that answer. This is a quiz question.
The Israelites also had important beliefs about the proper way for people to live. They believed that God called on them to act based on ethics, or ideas of right and wrong. Their teachings and practices became known as Judaism, the religion of the Jewish people. Judaism is one of the world's oldest religions.
Number 2, Israelites had important beliefs about what? In this highlighted pink area, you will find that answer. Let's move on to page 4. We will be looking at Abraham's covenant and the patriarchs. And by the looks of it, both of these questions are on the quiz. We're staying on the same page we've been on. So let's continue listening to this lesson.
What are the origins of Judaism? Most of what Jews believe about the origins of their religion comes from the Torah. The Torah consists of the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible. These are also the first 5 books of the Christian Old Testament, which has all of the books of the Hebrew Bible. The archaeology and history of Egypt and Mesopotamia also help us understand the world of the Torah. Abraham's Covenant. The Torah tells about a man named Abraham, who may have lived about 1700 BCE. He herded animals near Ur in Mesopotamia. According to the Torah, God told Abraham to leave Ur and travel with his family to Canaan, on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. The Torah says that God then made a covenant, or binding agreement, with Abraham. The land of Canaan would belong to Abraham's descendants, so it became known as the Promised Land.
Number 1 on page 4. The Israelites consider Canaan to be the promised land because they believed that what? So go ahead and look in this circled yellow text and get the answer to that quiz question.
Primary source. I will maintain my covenant between me and you, and your offspring to come, as an everlasting covenant throughout the ages, to be God to you and your offspring to come. Genesis 17:7. The Patriarchs. The Torah says that Abraham led his people to Canaan. Abraham, his son Isaac, and Isaac's son Jacob are known as the patriarchs, or the forefathers of the Jewish people. According to the Torah, Abraham's grandson Jacob had 12 sons. Each of Jacob's sons became the ancestor of at least one large group of related families called a tribe. Jacob was later renamed Israel. The 12 tribes descended from Jacob became known as the Israelites. Scholars believe that the stories of the patriarchs were passed along by word of mouth for hundreds of years. Eventually, they were written down in Genesis, the first book of the Torah.
Number 2, the forefathers of the Jewish people were known as, right here in this circled yellow text, you will find the answer to that quiz question. Let's move on to page 5 in your digital notebook. We need to click next one more time to get in Savas to the rest of the lesson.
What was the Exodus? The last chapters of Genesis describe a famine in Canaan. Because Egypt had great supplies of grain, according to the Torah, Jacob's family moved there. The book of Exodus comes after Genesis in the Torah. According to Exodus, as the number of Jacob's descendants grew, a new pharaoh or king of Egypt became mistrustful of them. Exodus describes how the pharaoh enslaved and mistreated the Israelites. According to the Torah, the pharaoh compelled the Israelites to do harsh work.
Number 1 on page 5 of your digital notebook. Why did the Egyptians enslave and mistreat the Israelites? You will find that answer in this green highlighted text. Moving on to page 6 in your digital notebook with Moses.
Moses. Exodus states that Moses was an Israelite who was adopted by the Pharaoh's family. According to Exodus, God appeared to Moses and told him to rescue his people. Moses asked the Pharaoh to let him lead the Israelites out of Egypt, but the Pharaoh refused.
Number 1, who appeared to Moses and what did they say? So there's 2 things here. So who appeared to Moses and what did they say to them? Get that information from this pink highlighted paragraph right here.
Exodus describes terrible hardships that God brought to Egypt because of the Pharaoh's refusal. The last and worst punishment was the death of every firstborn son of the Egyptians. Moses told the Israelites that God would let their sons live if they marked their doorways with the blood of a lamb. Finally, the Pharaoh allowed the Israelites to leave Egypt. Moses led the Israelites to the Sinai Peninsula, out of the Pharaoh's reach. The escape of the Israelites from slavery in Egypt is called the Exodus. Each year, Jews celebrate Passover to commemorate the journey from slavery in Egypt to freedom.
Number 2, what was the Exodus? Notice it is a quiz question. In this yellow circled text, you will find that answer. Moving on to page 7.
The Desert Experience. Many biblical scholars believe the Exodus occurred during the 1200s BCE. According to the Torah, after the Israelites left Egypt, they lived in the Sinai desert for 40 years. During this time, God prepared them for life in the Promised Land, then called Canaan. They received a series of instructions from God. They also learned ways to worship God and created important religious objects. On the journey through the desert to Canaan, according to the Torah, the Israelites faced harsh conditions. Occasionally, the Israelites battled other peoples. Some Israelites questioned the leadership of Moses or of God. However, they came to believe that if they obeyed God's commands, God would provide for them. The Torah states that during their journey, God even provided them with water and food.
In all of this pink highlighted text, I want you to go through it, reread it, take about 5 minutes, and tell me what happened to the Israelites in the desert for the 40 years. Right here, it talks about how they lived in the Sinai desert for 40 years. So summarize what happened to them in those 40 years. Give me a couple sentences here. So pause my video and do that now. Let's move on to page 8 in the digital notebook. You'll need to press next one more time. We are at the interactive map. Notice there's one quiz question on the interactive map. So let's go through this. Let's open this. So we have these red hot spots. It talks about Egypt. It talks about the Red Sea. And this is all about the Exodus, when those people were in the desert for 40 years. It talks about Mount Sinai. It talks about what happened in the Sinai desert. It talks about in Canaan. So the first question that it asks is, Jews and Christians both believe that the 10 Commandments were what? So you will find this answer to the quiz in the Mount Sinai right here. So number 1, you will find that quiz question in the Mount Sinai button. So click on Mount Sinai and look for the answer to Jews and Christians both believe that the 10 Commandments were what? So you will read through this and tell me, what do you think Christians and Jews both believed about the 10 Commandments? I have highlighted the couple sentences that tells us about the 10 Commandments. Who gave Moses the 10 Commandments? That's what we're looking for there. Next, we will click on this button, the introduction. Summarize the story of Exodus in Jewish history. I'm pretty sure you can summarize this paragraph, and that's what I want for number 2. So the story of the Exodus in the Jewish history, that's similar to those 40 days in the desert that you just talked about on page 7 right here. So summarize the story. Give me one sentence and tell me what happened. Let's move on to page 9 of the digital notebook. We will click next one more time. So this is a total of 4 times from the beginning. What are the 10 Commandments is what we are going to learn about on page 9 of our digital notebook.
What are the 10 Commandments? The book of Exodus says that during the Israelites' journey, they stopped at the foot of Mount Sinai. Moses went up the mountain to meet with God. The Torah tells how at Sinai, God gave Moses the Torah, which forms the foundation of Judaism. The Torah includes laws, among them those known today as the 10 Commandments. A commandment is an order to do something. The Torah contains many other laws, but the 10 Commandments are the most important.
Number 1, where did the Israelites stop while on their journey, and why did they stop there? So remember, this is as they are leaving. They're no longer slaves. They are now in the Sinai desert, wandering around for that 40 days. One of their stops was, it says in this blue, and why did they stop there? Pause my video and get that out of this blue highlighted text.
The accounts of Exodus and the 10 Commandments are important to Jews, Christians, and others. For them, the lesson of Exodus is that if people believe in God and obey God's laws, God will protect them and support them.
What is the lesson of Exodus? In this pink highlighted text, you will find that answer. Let's move on to the final page of the digital notebook, page number 10. If we scroll down to this chart, I know you can't see it very well right now. We'll have to enlarge it. We have 2 questions. The first question, look at the 10th commandment and infer what covet means. So let's make this bigger. So the 10th commandment is, you shall not covet your neighbor's house, nor his wife, nor anything that is your neighbor's. What do you think covet means? Oh, here we go. So what do you think covet means? Go ahead and pause my video and answer that now. Number 4, which commandment do you think is the hardest to follow? This is just your personal opinion, so there's no wrong answers. So let's enlarge this. Which commandment do you think would be the hardest to follow? Read through these commandments and choose one. So the first one, I, the Lord, am your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. So the explanation to this is to recognize God as the one and only God and to understand the relationship between people and God. I'm not going to read all these, but let me see. I'll do 5th. Honor your mother and father, your father and your mother. And this explanation is to respect and love your parents. So that is another one. You shall not steal is the 8th. The explanation to prevent taking another person's belongings. So to go between 1 and 10, read all of them, take about 5 minutes, read through all of them, read through the explanations, and then number 4, I want you to tell me which one do you think would be the hardest for you to follow. Again, there are no wrong answers. This is your personal opinion. Pause my video, take a few minutes, and get that answer now. Let's look through this digital notebook and review for the quiz. We have page 1. You should have monotheism, ethics, and Torah all defined using the Savas definition for your quiz. Page number 2, you should have covenant, Exodus, and commandment all defined using the Savas definition or the PowerPoint because that is the definition on your quiz. Page number 3, number 1 is on your quiz. Page number 4, number 1 and 2 are both on your quiz. Page number 6, number 2 is on your quiz. Page number 8, number 1 is on your quiz.